They always said I was just the tech guy, always scoffed at my contributions. So, I rescinded $62,000 in aid, reclaimed the $1.9 million lake house, and dismantled the infrastructure they thought was theirs. Just the tech guy, they'd scoff. My family found it amusing. In response, I rescinded $62,000 in aid, simply stating, "You'll manage without me now." At my parents' Golden Jubilee celebration, the individual whose tuition I financed for my brother raised his glass and announced, for all present to hear, our collective understanding. Jake, he proclaimed, would receive the cherished memories. I, on the other hand, was assigned the $1.9 million lakeside residence. My mother clapped her hands. My father offered a small smile. My aunt, Mayan, interjected, "Equity is key." No one met my gaze. I offered no rebuttal. I didn't question the vague, we all agreed. I merely elevated my own glass, letting the stillness linger, and remarked, "Congratulations. I'll simply claim what is rightfully mine." A quiet, unperturbed smile settled on my face, as if my course of action was already set. I hadn't arrived to instigate conflict. I was there out of ingrained routine, a sense of duty, and perhaps a flicker of optimism. I had secured the location, settled the $4,300 catering invoice, and paid the band up front because my father had claimed they were financially constrained that month. I even ensured a bespoke cake, bearing their wedding date etched in gold. Yet, throughout the speeches, I remained unmentioned, not as a son, a relative, or even the essential backbone. I endured the toasts, the jests, and their mirth as my brother declared he never genuinely desired the lake house. No partner, no offspring. What purpose would it serve him, truly? Everyone chuckled. Even Grandpa Joe averted his eyes. I did not. I took a bite of the expensive tenderloin, dabbed my lips, and uttered nothing. I could already sense the shift, the inner mechanism engaging. It wasn't anger. It didn't even sting. It felt stark, a cold, calculated realization. The kind that activates after enduring years of being merely tolerated, never truly seen. They didn't genuinely want me present. They only wanted what I provided. So, I left early, and without a sound. No dramatic exit, just a faint smile, a nod to the server, and a brief instruction for my assistant. First thing tomorrow, itemize every contribution I'd made to that property. They wouldn't foresee the ramifications, because in their perception, I was perpetually the reliable one, the problem solver, the benefactor, the unseen presence. But on that very evening, I ceased being unseen and commenced meticulous record-keeping. Sleep eluded me, not from distress, a phase I had long since transcended years ago. Instead, I remained awake, contemplating, recalling recurring patterns rather than isolated occurrences. The lake house incident, after all, was not the first instance where they compartmentalized existence into what I could supply and what I might receive. I vividly recalled underwriting my sister's $9,800 wedding reception. When I inquired why I hadn't been informed, she merely giggled, quipping, "You have no spouse or kids. Might as well find a purpose." I remember driving 6 hours for Christmas, only to discover my designated seat had been reallocated to a neighbor. "She's by herself this year," my mother stated. "You'll be perfectly fine in the kitchen." The kitchen? And as I complied quietly, without objection, my sister messaged, "Wow, sensitive about being overlooked, aren't we?" That night, I recalled checking my banking application and promptly halting the mortgage contributions I'd been making. The streaming subscriptions vanished, the shared premium accounts gone. I recalled the text message I received at 9:04 p.m. That evening, everything altered. "We had a discussion about you. You've always been a liability. You spoil every holiday, every gathering. We no longer require your presence." Such was their notion of resolution. Unsurprisingly, the lake house felt like the ultimate slight, because in their eyes, I was never truly kin. I was merely the financial backing, the emotional buffer, the technical support, and the emergency fallback. I had funded $12,400 for the landscaping that facilitated their anniversary celebration. Yet, I received no invitation. When I questioned this, my aunt offered, "Oh, it's strictly immediate family. I trust you understand." When I discontinued the monetary transfers, my father's text read, "Don't be dramatic." Was that not perpetually their refrain? Don't be dramatic? As if years of quiet compliance could suddenly metamorphose into childish outbursts the moment I ceased providing. I remembered withdrawing funding for my sister's wedding, not out of animosity, but because she had spent my resources as if inherently entitled, as if I held no existence. They consistently framed their actions as expressions of love, suggesting I was merely assisting. But their true meaning was my utility, my silence. I would never refuse. And for years, I didn't, harboring the hope that they would truly see me. I believed if I contributed sufficiently, repaired enough, and paid enough, they would finally perceive me as more than just the one who consistently erred. However, they only ever perceived utility. I provided and they applauded. I contributed and they apportioned it amongst themselves. I appeared and they subjected me to ridicule at every athletic event, family reunion, dinner, and significant life moment. I financed the facade. The elaborate pretense of the perfect family, complete with a damaged son who requested little but bestowed so much more. Gratitude was never extended. They simply anticipated my continued presence, my financial transfers, and my feigned ignorance. But I observed. When I suffered injuries, they averted their gaze. My mother would assure others, "It's perfectly all right. Truly, he still possesses one functional arm." As though that rendered me fully restored. My brother, at every Thanksgiving, would jest, nicknaming me RoboCop, as if I were a mere spectacle. My father once declared, "We won't tread carefully simply because you endured a difficult year." One difficult year. That was his characterization of the entire decade I dedicated to rebuilding my existence. This was the recurring dynamic. They deemed me insignificant, yet simultaneously depended on me. They desired my presence without acknowledging the giver, my services without valuing the individual, and my contributions without offering recognition. I once believed they were unaware of the extent of my generosity, but that was mistaken. They knew. They relied upon it. Hence, the lake house episode held no element of surprise. It was merely the ultimate affirmation. And as I regarded the whiskey glass in my hand that evening, a resolve solidified. I would no longer relinquish my resources, my quiet compliance, or my sense of self. I would reclaim everything. For I was no longer the child returning to mend fences. I was the child returning to sever the power supply. I didn't cause a scene the morning after the lake house pronouncement. Instead, I meticulously cataloged every item, room by room, not from vindictiveness or a need for accounting, but for absolute clarity. Everything I had acquired, installed, financed, or upheld over the years was now unequivocally mine again. By 9 a.m., I stood in their driveway. My brother answered the door, clad in athletic shorts and nursing a protein shake. He uttered nothing, simply remaining rooted, like someone witnessing the receding tide reveal long-hidden detritus. First, the evident removals. My smart lock was dismounted in under 3 minutes. My father's audio system and the 65-inch OLED television, which I had purchased believing he deserved an authentic cinematic encounter, were now absent. The central Wi-Fi mesh I had installed last year, designed to avert internet disruptions during my mother's video calls, had been disconnected. The smart lighting application, the intelligent kitchen tap, and the remote access for their security cameras were all gone. By noon, the residents felt alien. Not because I had caused damage, but because I had systematically dismantled the underlying infrastructure they had been entirely unaware I maintained. My actions were not malevolent. They were exact. The thermostat ceased its remote functionality. The refrigerator's touch interface became inert. The emergency generator's remote surveillance capabilities were disabled. Then came the financial adjustments. I accessed their mortgage account, removed my cosigner status, and initiated a reevaluation process. I already knew the outcome. They would not qualify for a new loan following the refinancing I facilitated 2 years prior. Next, the phone plans, all 5 lines registered in my name. I transferred full proprietorship, with a condition. If not accepted within 72 hours, the lines would be deactivated. I logged into every streaming platform, canceling each subscription. Netflix, Hulu, HBO, Amazon Prime, even their shared password management service, all ceased to function. Their online deliveries were interrupted. Their password autofill failed. Their living room television now displayed only visual noise. Around 2 p.m., my brother finally spoke. "This is absurd." I offered no reply. I simply unplugged the router and exited. Next, I proceeded to terminate their business accounts. My parents' enterprise had relied on my company's digital framework for over a decade. Cloud storage, encrypted communications, firewall management, and software licenses were all integral components of my corporate platform, for which I had never charged them a single cent. I accessed the portal and closed their profile, ensuring a clean, professional, and definitive conclusion. I left a message on their dashboard. This system was maintained without charge for 11 years. As of today, it has been decommissioned. Thank you. They had no comprehension of their dependency on me until every system ceased functioning. By 3:30 p.m., the clinic's primary desk messaged me, "We're completely locked out. Please assist." I provided no response. Instead, I forwarded the message to a colleague, instructing him to levy the full emergency service fee, and then commenced the extensive recovery process for the lake house. I had never desired the property, yet I had covered half of its renovations. A new pier, water purification systems, and guest cabin enhancements had all been financed from my accounts, simply because I was assisting. I meticulously gathered the invoices and highlighted each transaction. Subsequently, I contacted an attorney. He didn't even flinch. "Do you wish to reclaim or recoup?" he inquired. "Both," I affirmed. He began drafting a claim, quietly and precisely. No sensationalism, just documented facts. Then, I returned to the house. The final item from the dining table, valued at $3,800, was recovered. The patio chairs, acquired using my vehicle during a family emergency, were loaded. The espresso machine I had gifted them 2 Christmases prior, which my mother claimed made her feel finally acknowledged, was carefully swaddled in towels and boxed. At one point, my brother attempted to obstruct my path. "You're not taking the flooring, man." I merely smiled and continued, possessing, quite literally, my receipts. By twilight, the house felt hollow, structurally sound, yet stripped of every investment I had poured into it. Only one item remained, an old wooden box tucked away in the back of a closet. It contained antique photographs and forgotten mementos. I opened it. Inside lay cards I'd penned through the years, personal notes, hospital identification bands, a dried corsage from my sister's high school dance, and a medal from when I possessed both hands. Atop it all was a folded drawing I'd created at 7. "My family," it read, depicting smiling stick figures. They had preserved it, despite everything. I gazed at it for a considerable time. Then, I closed the box and left it on the dining table. It was the sole item I did not remove, not because I desired memories but because I yearned for space. I drove home that night and experienced the most profound sleep in years. No urgent calls, no frantic texts, no lingering guilt. Just profound quiet. I finally grasped it. I hadn't destroyed the family. I had merely disengaged myself from the intricate mechanism that kept it functioning. They didn't contact me immediately, neither the subsequent morning nor the day after. The stillness persisted for 4 full days. Yet it wasn't a peaceful calm. It felt like pressure, an internal conduit swelling, on the verge of rupturing. And then it did. On day 5 at 8:17 a.m., I received the inaugural group message from my mother, father, and brother. "You're overreacting. This was a collective family decision. We assumed you'd comprehend. This doesn't need to be irreversible. Let's rectify this. You're behaving like a stranger." I offered no reply. An hour later, my mother dispatched a distinct message. "I'm mortified you're attempting to penalize us instead of communicating. This isn't your true self. You're not a monster." That was the prevailing sentiment. Not an apology or accountability, but pure denial, fear, and transference. They weren't remorseful. They were terrified. Because, for the first time in years, I had withdrawn the safety net, the contingency, the restorer. By midday, my voicemail inbox was full. My father sent 2 identical text messages consecutively. "Just call me. Don't do anything foolish." By foolish, they meant permanent. They understood I was no longer bluffing. The situation deteriorated further by evening. Aunt Gloria posted an ambiguous status update on social media. "Some individuals will sacrifice kinship for personal pride." It was subtle, insufficient to directly name me, yet everyone recognized the veiled accusation. The defamation campaign then notably intensified. It commenced with a message from my cousin Tasha. "They're claiming you're experiencing a mental collapse." I received a screenshot from the family's group chat, of which I was no longer a participant. My brother had written, "He's been behaving unusually lately. We need to afford him space. He's not thinking rationally." Followed by my mother's contribution, "This is the consequence of suppressing emotions for years. He was always so reserved." They weren't merely trying to elicit sympathy. They were actively rewriting history. I wasn't being deliberate. I was supposedly in a downward spiral. I wasn't establishing boundaries. I was deemed dangerous. Despite this, no one reached out to ascertain what had genuinely transpired. They simply assumed the established narrative held true. The reserved brother, the unconventional one, the target of their jest. But I was no longer that individual. I was the unexpected tempest. That evening, an unknown number appeared on my phone. I nearly ignored it. It was Harper, my brother's partner. Her voice trembled. "They're attempting to ruin your reputation," she asserted. She claimed to have overheard a discussion. My parents had convened to strategize the precise language to use. They were fabricating a chronology to suggest I had exhibited erratic behavior for years, aiming to present the wedding cancellation, streaming account closures, and company system shutdowns as manifestations of mental decline, rather than a deliberate strategy or calculated severance. Harper divulged that even the therapist they had previously engaged was being drawn in. My mother had contacted her, inquiring if she had ever noted any troubling signs. It was at that moment I understood. They weren't striving to reconcile. They were endeavoring to discredit me, to nullify my actions by portraying me as mentally unbalanced. The anonymous emails followed. 2 were dispatched to my workplace, containing ambiguous allegations, apprehensions about recent emotional fluctuations, and allusions to concerning conduct. I traced the IP addresses. One originated from my parents' local library, the other from a residential internet provider. I required no further proof. They were desperate, and desperate individuals abandoned their caution. But I offered no response. Not once, not to messages, social media posts, or calls. I allowed silence to convey my message, for I anticipated what would inevitably occur next. A direct confrontation. They did indeed appear that Sunday afternoon. My mother, father, and brother stood at my doorstep, much like delivering a holiday dish on Thanksgiving. They didn't ring the doorbell. Just 3 figures poised, awaiting their cue. I allowed them to remain for a full 2 minutes before unlatching the door. I offered no invitation inside, no smile. I simply stated, "You have 5 minutes." My mother immediately dissolved into tears. Not from genuine sorrow, but from feeling exposed and cornered. She launched into a diatribe concerning familial misunderstandings and the swiftness of the situation's escalation. My father chimed in with his usual refrain, "You've always been intense, but this isn't like you." My brother remained silent, jaw clenched. I waited. Then I spoke. "You aren't here out of genuine concern. You're here because the lights are off, and you're uncertain how to navigate the darkness." Silence enveloped us. I then turned to my mother. "You permitted them to claim I was unsound." I faced my father. "You observed it unfold." I looked at my brother. "And you initiated it." That was the precise moment my brother's composure fractured. "You're discarding your own family for what? Arrogance?" I almost chuckled. "No. I'm distancing myself for the sake of my own well-being." They were unaccustomed to this iteration of me. The one who remained unwavering. The one who no longer required their validation to complete a task. My mother made one final attempt. "We are your family." And I stated plainly, "No, you were. Now you are merely individuals I once financially supported." I then closed the door. They didn't knock again. They didn't shout. They simply stood there, despondent and bewildered, recognizing that the elaborate structure they had built around me had crumbled, and they possessed no means to rebuild it without my involvement. They had not anticipated my public disclosure. Their ultimate hope was my continued silence, that even after I withdrew funds, systems, and aid, I would still protect their public image. They presumed I would remain in the background, believing my quietude signified allegiance. It did not. It was calculated restraint. So I unveiled the truth. First, the online post, a simple caption. For those curious about my recent silence, here's what that quiet concealed. Attached were screenshots from the group conversation where my mother declared me perpetually unstable, my brother's message labeling me a sunk cost, the canceled invoices I had paid, and the defamatory email traced back to their network. I added no commentary, no hashtags. There was no rage, only irrefutable facts. Within an hour, the post garnered over 300 shares from acquaintances, professional peers, and even extended family. Next, I uploaded a second file, video surveillance from my doorbell camera. My mother stood in my driveway. My father was behind her, hurling projectiles, brandishing branches, and bellowing. The very individuals who asserted I was unraveling. The same individuals screaming, "We furnished you with everything." I obscured my own face, not out of necessity, but because I desired the focus to remain on the veracity of the situation, rather than on personal vengeance. Then came the final upload, a PDF document titled Records. It contained banking statements detailing my contributions to their mortgage, streaming subscriptions, weddings, and educational expenses. Email verifications included my authorizations for home improvements, travel arrangements, and business systems. Legal papers affirmed my detachment from their financial obligations. No alterations, no elaborations, simply undeniable reality. I then closed my laptop. I didn't review comments. I didn't anticipate reactions, for the truth wasn't meant for them. It was intended for those they had attempted to deceive. By evening, my inbox was inundated with messages from former acquaintances, professional peers, and even several cousins. My cousin Tasha's message stood out. "You didn't dismantle the family. You exposed it." Even more impactful was a quote from my uncle's dental clinic assistant. "So, you were the one maintaining everything. We had no idea. They always referred to you as merely the tech person. We apologize." That resonated differently because it mirrored the long-standing family narrative. I was portrayed as the damaged one, the assistant, the miserable individual seeking a purpose. And then they realized I was the very foundation. When I withdrew, everything disintegrated. There was no theatricality, no reprisal, just equilibrium. My mother deactivated her social media profiles the next day. My father's email auto-replied with an indefinite, out-of-office message. My brother became inactive online, deleting past posts and restricting his profile's visibility. It wasn't about disgrace, it was about public exposure. They could no longer manipulate the narrative, not while the evidence was publicly accessible. And that's when the dynamic fundamentally shifted. They didn't merely lose a son, they lost the fabricated narrative they had spun about him. They requested one final meeting. No collective message, no overt pressure, just a concise email from my father. If you can spare 10 minutes, we'd like to see you. No drama, just resolution. It sounded premeditated, carefully crafted, polished to achieve plausibility, as though they had finally enlisted an expert to refine their apologies. I didn't reply. I simply appeared. The same residence, the same driveway. The very front door I had walked away from months prior. My brother was absent. Only my parents waited in the living room, as if for some peculiar family therapy session. My mother rose quickly upon seeing me, her eyes already moist. My father remained seated. "Thank you for coming," she added, as though we were strangers concluding a commercial transaction. I remained silent. I offered a single nod and positioned myself opposite them. The room appeared unusually tidy, excessively staged. The fireplace flickered, despite it being July. On the coffee table rested 2 mugs. One bore the inscription, "World's Best Son." My mother pushed it towards me, as if it possessed the power to reset the entire dynamic. I didn't touch it. My father cleared his throat. He then began, "We've reflected on what transpired and what we uttered, and we wish to make it clear. We never intended to make you feel unwanted." He spoke as if carefully navigating a legal boundary, presenting a meticulously drafted damage control statement rather than an authentic confession. My mother then interjected, "You've always been so formidable, so capable. We hadn't realized the immense burden you carried." They hadn't realized. That became the recurring refrain of the day. We were oblivious. We merely utilized you. Just an oversight. We hadn't observed. I allowed them to speak. I permitted them to vocalize their lamentations about the perceived state of affairs. They expressed sorrow that the family was now so fragmented. They discussed therapy, rebuilding trust, and commencing anew. They employed every conceivable phrase except the ones that truly mattered. We were wrong. We were cruel. We treated you as a resource, not as a child. Finally, my father added, "We miss you." Then, a profound silence settled, and I provided them with something entirely unforeseen. I stood up calmly, self-possessed, and stated, "You do not miss me. You miss the infrastructure. You miss the financial contributions. You miss the version of me who paid, remained silent, and allowed you to believe it was love." My mother gasped. My father blinked, as if struck. I continued without pause. "You do not miss me. You miss what I provided you. Free labor, unwavering compliance. The automated yes." I turned to my mother. "You permitted them to disparage me. You allowed them to claim I was unstable. And when I remained silent, you interpreted it as serenity. It was not peace. I was merely surviving you." Then, facing my father, "You instilled in me that loyalty equated to obedience. That affection was earned through self-sacrifice. But that was not love. It was utility." They attempted to interject. I persisted. "You cannot implore for clemency after decades of casual cruelty. You cannot pretend this was a misunderstanding. This was a transaction. And I have, at last, terminated my subscription." My mother began to weep. Not soft tears, but profound, racking sobs, as though performing for forgiveness. I remained still. She mumbled, "But we are still your parents." And I replied, "You were. And you wielded that designation like an unrestricted credit card. It is now at its limit, and you bear responsibility for the overdue balance." My father rose. He seemed older than I recalled, diminished, as if deflated. He uttered a single question, his voice faltering. "Is that all? Are you truly done?" I met his gaze. "No. I concluded the night you reassigned my place for discounted flooring. I'm merely extinguishing the illumination." They had nothing more to articulate. I didn't await a farewell. I stepped out, moving past the static framed photographs, past the fireplace, kept lit purely for aesthetic, past the counterfeit mug proclaiming, "World's Best Son." I closed the door behind me. I didn't slam it. I simply clicked it shut, like the final page of a narrative. That night, I received one ultimate message from my mother. "You will come to regret this someday. Family is eternal." And I responded with a singular truth they had never anticipated. "No. Family is something one cultivates." And you returned it fractured. I then blocked her number. Afterward, I slept. There was no remorse. No persistent internal clamor. No oppressive burden on my chest, because I hadn't merely rejected them. For the first time in 2 decades, I had affirmed myself.